Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. Today's video is going to be about the orchid that I showed you in yesterday's video, the Phalaenopsis that was planted in the sphagnum moss, and the blooms were beginning to wilt and the leaves were floppy. So by the time I post this video, 3 or 4 or maybe 5 days will have passed, because this is going to be a video that needs to be pieced together over the course of several days. So let me first kind of update you with where I am with this orchid, and then we'll talk about what I'll be doing over the next 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 days. So this was the Phalaenopsis in yesterday's video. I have cut the 2 bloom spikes. They were even more wilted this morning than they were in the video that I made yesterday. The leaves are still very floppy, and I want to kind of give a close-up even on the bottom of this leaf if the camera will pick it up. You can tell that the leaves are becoming wrinkled, and that is a sure sign of dehydration, and that's what's causing the floppiness. That one even has more pronounced wrinkles. And here you can see okay, so this is sort of a 911 SOS rescue situation. So bloom spikes have been cut. It was planted in this chopped sphagnum moss. Very tight, no air circulation, and you can see, the root system has not been trimmed, and I'm leaving it this way on purpose for what I'm about to do next. The roots are even, in some cases, beginning to be sort of flat and shriveled, but I'm not trimming them because I want every single living root cell to be able to participate in this next process, which is going to be a tea bag soak for the orchid roots. Okay, now, first of all, you will read some sources that say you can use tea bags as fertilizer. I don't particularly buy into that because the amount of fertilizer that an orchid can get from a tea bag is minuscule. However, getting some nutrition from a tea bag mimics what happens in nature. So in a tea bag, there's a natural substance called tannins. And tannins can be found in tree bark and leaves and flowers and fruit and all different kinds of plant parts. So if an orchid is growing in the wild, as water trickles down the plant structures, tannins are delivered to the orchid's roots. And tannins are mostly high in nitrogen, which helps plant leaves and helps root development. So as the tannins trickle down to the orchid does get nutrients that way in the wild. If we tried to do that though as home growers, it would probably be far too weak because we're trying to substitute those tannins through a tea bag. Okay, so best kind of tea bag to use, I would recommend black tea. Make sure it doesn't have any other flavorings, components, additives in it, because some of those things could be harmful to your orchid. So make sure it's pure black tea. And the tannins will also sort of lower the pH around the roots while they're soaking, and that's what orchids like. It'll lower the pH to around maybe 5 or 5.5, especially if the water you're using is a little bit of a higher pH. Okay, so let's talk about how to do this. So I have a cup here, and I actually have a tea bag that I have used for this purpose before, so I know it's a black tea bag. You can reuse the tea bag because we are not going to make strong tea. We are only going to make very, very weak tea. So let me go to the sink and I'll put some water in here. And I'm filling the container up because I do want the roots to be submerged, but I don't want the crown of the orchid to be submerged. So you can tell that this water is already turning tea colored. We don't need it much darker than that. So I'm going to give it a few more seconds. And squeeze out the tea bag. And that's really about all you need. Very, very weak tea. Now, every 3 or 4 days, you need to remake this tea water if you're going to soak your orchid longer than that. Okay, so this is the process that I use. And what we're going to hope for is that every single root that's still alive on this orchid is going to be working on the orchid's behalf here. So that's why I haven't trimmed anything yet. And we're going to put the roots down in that tea mixture. It helps to have the type of container so that the leaves can hold the orchid up. We don't want the tea to get into the crown of the plant, and preferably not even down that far. I've got a bit too much water. I'm going to pour a little bit out. And this way the orchid can rest there and the plant parts are not getting wet. Okay, so the process is you put the orchid in the tea water in the morning when you get up, and a couple of hours before sunset you take the plant out and you let the roots dry overnight. So just lay it on a paper towel, let everything dry overnight. In the morning when you get back up, put it in the tea water, and you can sort of check from day to day if you're seeing improvement. I have done this for as long as a week on a Phalaenopsis I was trying to save. Hopefully I won't have to do that for a week for this orchid. Generally you can see some improvement after about 3 days. So I'm hoping that if I do this for 3 days, then I can just dispose of the tea water and I don't have to remake it. But this is how it goes. So you do this sort of in and out of the tea for about 3 days, see if you see improvement. And then after that, you can go ahead and trim the roots. You can continue repotting this Phalaenopsis as usual. But we're going to cross our fingers, hope for some improvement here. And tomorrow I will check back in with the video segment so we can see how we're doing. Okay, thanks for watching. And the next part of the video will be coming up next. Okay, so back with day 2. It's 7:30 in the morning. Last night, or rather late yesterday afternoon, around 4 o'clock, I removed the orchid from the tea soak and it has now dried overnight. The roots still have, you know, some what I would call strange gray spots versus the places where the roots are actually green. So, you know, that's not a healthy root system. But yesterday when I took it out of the tea soak, all of the roots were really, really green. I would say that, you know, the leaves are still, you know, pretty floppy. So we definitely need to do the tea soak for probably another day or 2. Yesterday, the orchid was falling down inside the cup and the water was getting a little bit too high up on the leaves, so I used the stakes from the flower spikes to help hold it up. So we're putting it back in the tea soak for today. I'll put the stakes under to support it so it doesn't fall in. And we wait until this afternoon when we take it out. I probably will be soaking this one for a 3rd day. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, so this is the morning of day 3 of the tea bag soak for this orchid. Yesterday I noticed that my close-up of the root system was not in focus, so hopefully this one will be. You can tell that there's portions of the roots that are green, but then there are still these gray areas, and I do believe that's the places where the roots were no longer beginning to function, and it's kind of like the beginning parts where the root system was dying. So I am going to do a 3rd day of soak for this orchid because I think it's working a little bit. I can tell that these 2 upper leaves are a bit more stiff. They're not quite as floppy. If you look on the bottom, the wrinkling has decreased a little bit, at least on the top 2 leaves. The leaf down from there is still a bit more wrinkled, but I think even that's improved. So I'm going to go ahead and set my sticks up here, and this is going to be day 3 of the soak. We will check back in tomorrow morning and make a decision about whether to do a 4th day. Okay, so this is going to stay here until about 4 or 4:30, and then I'll be taking it out for the night at least one more time. Okay, so this is day 4 of the tea soak for the orchid roots, and it's been drying overnight on the paper towel. Let's have a look at the roots again. It's pretty much unchanged. When the orchid dries, you can still see the gray spots on the roots, which are not entirely normal for a healthy root system. But the good news is that a lot of the leaf floppiness has resolved itself. Before, when I was holding this orchid like this, the leaves were sagging down onto my hand, and now they actually have a bit more substance to them. They are more upright. Well, let's have a look on the bottom. The top leaves have improved a noticeable amount. The lower leaves, not as much, but the lower leaves, being older, would have a more difficult time becoming rehydrated, but they have also improved a noticeable amount. This one, not as much, but this is the oldest, or one of the oldest leaves on the plant. And this one, also an older leaf. But overall, I'm happy with this orchid not being as floppy as it was previously. So I think this is going to be my plan for this orchid. I'm not going to have a chance today to repot it because the day is just going to get really busy. But what I think I'll do because of that is I will go ahead and make a fresh cup of tea for this orchid and just let it soak one more day. If I were able to repot it today, I might not have done that. But since I'm not going to be able to do that, I will let it soak one more day. Then tomorrow, what I will do is I will trim some of the obvious dead roots. So some of these white ones that are just papery thin, and they're more towards the core of the orchid. I will trim those off. I'm not going to go crazy with trimming any root that's green, realizing that after I pot this orchid, I will be losing many of these roots. I know that's going to happen. So what I will be doing is not fertilizing this orchid until I see some sort of new growth. either in the way of a root or something from the crown of the plant. And when I see that starting to happen, then I will be giving this orchid just the tiniest bit of weak fertilizer. Until then, it's just going to be getting plain water. And I realize that many of these roots are going to die inside the media. So I'm also going to mark it to be repotted next year, because these roots that are going to die will make the media inside the pot go off more quickly. So that's kind of the general plan for this orchid, to try to rehabilitate it. I think I'll end this video here, because hopefully you've seen that this can help rehydrate an orchid that is stressed. And if you like this video or learned something new, please hit the like button. The subscribe button will be in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. I would love for you to join in with the comments in this group, and talk with you next time.